Hello, welcome to Wargamer. I'm your host, Rob. In this video, we're going to be asking ourselves the question, has the first year of Age of Sigmar 4 been good or bad for the game, the community, what happened, and how do we feel about it? I'm joined by the Twitch chat, and this is going to be pretty long, maybe a little bit of a rambly video, where we're going to go through all of the kind of keynote points that happened in the Age of Sigmar 4's first year. So that should be its first of 3 years, because normally these games are on a 3-year cycle. And with the new General's Handbook and the second year of Age of Sigmar, the second season kicking off, the second of 3, we're going to ask ourselves what we think about it in the future. And we're backed up by some pretty fantastic stats at the end of the video. We're going to be having a look at how many people have been playing this game. 2-day events, so like a tournament, we've had over 12,000 players. 29,000 games, over 359 events, and you can see from countries all around the world. So we'll be talking about that later in this video. But before we do that, we're going to kind of break down the launch. We're going to talk about the battle tomes and everything else, and we're going to get straight into it. So the first year of Age of Sigmar 4th edition launched with a sad note. In memoriam, we have the Beast of Chaos and also some Stormcast models, as well as Bone Splitters. This isn't the first, and it won't be the last of the Age of Sigmar models that we see purged from the range. This is kind of an interesting place to be if you're an Age of Sigmar fan, especially if you're someone who's new. I started playing Age of Sigmar on day 1. That's not to show off. That's to show that at that time, which factions were what factions was actually incredibly confused. Age of Sigmar didn't have a GHB or even points until its very first year of life. And then at that point, there were still units and armies and model ranges where we were like, we're not sure what those are. For instance, Wood Elves used to be called Wanderers before they were eventually squatted out of the game. So we've lost lots of models and entire ranges over the course of Age of Sigmar's life cycle. Kind of feels a little bit like what happens, because they're still a little bit confused in the direction that they want to take this. I would assume it's because the team changes internally, and also because the very dynamic of what they might want it to be changes based on like market conditions and a bunch of other factors. So the long-term plan for what they want it to be is kind of like a big question mark. So I guess that's why we see these changes and we see stuff go away. So that's pretty sad. Seeing Beast of Chaos go was, I think, very sad. Bone Splitters and also the Stormcast stuff, which a lot of people were very upset about. There was even some really popular YouTube videos people were able to make where they were like, I've lost all of my miniatures. How will I live? Which is fair. Like, it's really fair. But they're a corporation. They're going to cooperate, and they're going to continue to do so. I want you to know I don't support that. And also, I really support you using any of those models as proxies. If you want to use Bestigor as chosen in a Chaos army, I run events. I'd let you do it. That's fine. Like, you know, we're a really good, healthy community. I don't think anyone's going to, like, say, your old Liberators can't be your new Liberators. So that's all okay, in my personal opinion. But I guess you don't feel like they're as valid, which is really fair. So that was a sad note to kick us off with the launch of the edition. But they did say that a little bit ahead of time. So then we saw all of the new rules and information that would be coming out for Age of Sigmar, and there was an incredibly confusing message when Age of Sigmar 4 came around. They said, hey, all of your battle tomes are going away, and we're going to do an index edition. Okay, that could be really fun and really interesting. Obviously, a little bit annoyed about all the books that I bought, although I personally don't advocate for you buying books. I think you should buy models and other stuff instead. Find the rules if you need them. But it was a little bit odd, because they're like, the index edition, we're going to do a whole new thing. There's going to be abilities. Everything's going to be cool and new and interesting. Cool. That was pretty fun to look at. But then they were like, hey, by the way, we're also inventing a new game style called Spearhead. And initially, I still am, really on board with the idea that 2 people go into a game store, your local game store, and they pick up 2 starter boxes. They pick up a Cities of Sigmar one and a Slaves to Darkness one, and then they go, we're going to battle against each other, and there's a game format. And that kind of works, apart from you also have to buy another box, which gives you the map and all of the cards and everything else. So you do already get sold like another thing, because you can't just play a box versus a box. But Games Workshop were really keen to stress that Spearhead was the thing that was most interesting to them. You can play it on your lunch break. They had this pretty terribly produced live stream of some famous wrestlers even playing it at an American event, which didn't go very well, because neither of them really knew how to play it. The camera work was pretty terrible, and and the models were painted terribly. And it was the first time that we, as like an audience, had seen these models in person, apart from like box art photos, and they were like just like contrasted, which I guess means they're achievable. Whatever. Very fun moment, but it was a confused message. Definitely, it was like, "Are you excited?" Like, as me as an Age of Sigmar fan, I was like, "Hey, I want to find out more about Age of Sigmar." They're like, "But have you heard about Spearhead?" I'm like, "That's cool. I don't need a Spearhead. I've already got several 2,000 point armies. I'm ready to play. Tell me about that game." They're like, "But what about playing on your lunch break?" I'm like, "I don't want to play on my lunch break. I want to eat my lunch on my lunch break." It's a confused message at the start, which I think a lot of people will back me up on. But I'm really hopeful there's lots of people out there really enjoying the format and the system. Okay, then we got the Index launch, which I think was pretty exciting. It was staggered over a couple of weeks, and people got their rules, and we started to see these more slimmed down and toned back war scrolls with not as much data on them as maybe we've seen in previous editions. There's not quite as much. There wasn't necessarily as much flavor, which I think is a fair thing to say, but also there wasn't as much complexity, which I think a lot of people were really, really happy about. And this is a good kind of jump-off point to talk about the mainline philosophy of what seems to be like 40k in Age of Sigmar. I'm a huge defender of the current style that Age of Sigmar exists inside of, even if I think the War Scrolls or the rules for the War Scrolls really don't tell the story of what those units are. The reason for that is I run events at the weekends, and when I see people playing events at the weekends, they have a busy life. They've got a family, they've got a job, or whatever it might be, and they're like, I haven't really played much, or and they get a really easy game to play, really. You lay out your War Scroll cards or your bits of paper that you've written down or your screenshots of PDF, whatever it might be. They look at the board and they put their models down. They go, right, it's my turn. It's like, your turn. Okay, cool. I'm going to go stand on a circle. And they're like, yeah, you got it. 5 points for you. Like, amazing. And they feel really happy about that. And I watch people do that even at like 2-day competitive events. And the fact that you can build a game system that's that simple to at least have a go at, I think is really good. I think it's good. So they launched this thing. They started talking about everything being abilities and you being able to do everything's an ability, and there's an ability stack, and it's like Magic the Gathering, which became this kind of like joke, or at least it became this joke inside of my community, because many people in my community also play Magic the Gathering. You watching this at home may also play Magic the Gathering, but I don't think it's like it at all. I don't think. I played a pre-release just this weekend. I don't think they're the same at all. I kept telling people at the pre-release that this was a lot like Age of Sigmar, and they looked at me very funny, so I don't think it's the same. Anyway. But that mainline philosophy is very different to the much more crunchy rules that you're seeing, like the Horus Heresy, which has got an upcoming release, the Old World, Necromunda, and stuff like that, and follows along very much with the 40k mainline philosophy that it's much simpler to plug and play and do stuff with. And I do think that's true. We'll talk about maybe the impact of that later, but I think that's good. Also, we started to see some of the positive rules and some of the negative rules. I think the one that most people were most stressed about was the 3-up, do D3 mortals. Oh boy. No boy, no one loves that. Or 3-up, do an ability. 3-up, do an ability. Anyway, big launch. Everyone got new models, not new models, new rules, new ways to play. Then we found out that everyone would get free manifestations as well. And that became a little bit confusing because manifestations themselves are a super complex addition to add on to the game. They're quite confusing even now. People are like, is that a movie one or is that a still one? Can you get within range? What can I do? And it's unfortunately it's had to have like lots of FAQs and stuff over the course. But that's the Index launch. And I think generally people are excited about a new game system and getting and tucking into the new rules, learning what all of the new rules meant, building new armies. Okay, so then we got into the starter box launch where we got that Skaven Tide box where it was all the Skaven minis and it was the Stormcast release. And I think it was kind of interesting. I think Skaven players love clan rats no matter what they say, but I think Skaven players already have lots of clan rats, so it's kind of an odd and confusing release. Stormcast models look really, really good. They were super fun, and there were some really nice models in that box as well. So that was cool. There was maybe an issue in Games Workshop either overproducing or it underproduced. It either overproduced or undersold this box, because later in the year, around October time, we saw an event in Australia give away 100 Skaven Tide boxes. And then later into 2025, we saw like 4,000 boxes of it being given away at Adepticon. So there was definitely an maybe production or maybe an underselling of it. You'll have to let me know in the comments which of the two you think happened. But definitely lots of people picked up the Skaven type box, and we saw lots of those minis flying around all over. So starter box out in the wild, everyone started playing new games, and there was a massive uptick in how many people were playing games, running events, attending events, and we saw a lot of people playing. There was also a lot of conversation around this point about some people dropping off from the game. Now, we do have some information on this in that, like, I feel that what we ended up within this edition, now we're a year later, we ended up with a lot of churn in the community. What I mean by that is I think we saw some of the older players be like, that's it for me. I'm probably going to like jump out at this point. And there probably is a life cycle to players in games like this. And then a bunch of new people being like, I'm excited. I'm about to jump into the game. And this is the start for me. And I think that's what new editions really do. You know, it kind of like separates out those people where they're like, I'm probably done now. And then some people are like, I'm going to jump in at this point. Give me a chance to start again. Now, the first month before we started to see any battle tomes was pretty crazy. The game was definitely not perfect. We had Nighthaunt especially being far, far too strong in the game. But what we saw a month in was some pretty aggressive points changes in FAQs. And in fact, that system maintained for about the next 6 months. So there was some very aggressive, very early balancing of the game from Games Workshop outside of what is their normal 3-month balance patches that they normally do. This was actually pretty impressive to see, even if the data that they were basing it on was pretty weak. And sometimes they were just like Ogre Gluttons did well for 1 week in week 3 and then got slammed into the ground for the rest of the life cycle of the last year for no reason. But even though the data set wasn't particularly strong, the decision to actually like very aggressively monitor the game at the launch, I feel is really positive. And I think like while some players who had those armies felt a little bit hard done by, ultimately it was better for the health of the game, and the game has produced a far more kind of like static baseline over the course of the game. It's been more balanced, I guess is what I'm going to say, over the course of the year. Then we started to see the first battle tomes, and this was pretty interesting. This was pretty interesting when we started to see the first battle tomes, because we found out that when a new battle tome comes out, all of the rules that were currently free were then locked. So the first book that came out was a Skaven book, and previously on the Age of Sigmar app, you could look at all the rules for the Skaven army for free. Then when the book came out, they were locked and you can no longer look at them. Now, some people consider this to be a massive deal and get very upset by this. And this has been really against the philosophy of Age of Sigmar, which initially launched with like free rules and, everything was free and you could always check it out, which I think is a really good marketing move. You can check out, you get like that kind of like brainworm where you say to yourself, but what if I did own a Cruel Boys army? And then you like look up the unit and you go, 2 wounds each on a 5-up save, huh? I can make that work. Same energy as I can change them. You can't make that work. But anyway, you would see that and you think, yeah, maybe you go to the local store or maybe you just go online while you've got that like little brainworm and immediately you've got yourself a Cruel Boys army. Now, that is locked away and you're not able to do that, right? That is probably a big marketing mistake in my opinion. I think a lot of people also were just generally upset that they couldn't look through the rules for free, which I agree with as well. So that happened in the app. And then the first book we got was the Skaven book. Now, the Skaven book got a bunch of new models. We got the new new Vizic that was cool, and a bunch of other new Skaven dudes, which they were very nice models. But this is where we get into maybe the next sticking point over the past year, which was, it was copy-pasted. Most of it, apart from the new stuff, was exactly the same as the free indexes that they'd released at the launch of the game. They released an index for every single army, and they were the same rules as in there. Now, I gotta say that I think that initially that's okay. The reason I say that, and I think this is pretty important, and also as to answer the question as why are they like that, if you don't already know, when they write these books, they write them at least a year in advance. So the Skaven and Stormcast book were written a year before they were ever released at the start of the edition. So they have no idea about like what the meta is going to be like or how the armies are going to perform. So they're not really writing these to counter meta or change the game or anything like that. They're just writing them in a vacuum. So a real question I think got asked a lot of that time. You've just had the index with all of the free rules for Skaven. do you really 1 month later want them to do a rug pull and change all of the rules for how that Skaven army works? Like, you know, that would be pretty unfair to people that just jumped into Skaven at the launch of the game, and then all of a sudden those units didn't work the same way that they previously thought. I thought that was a really fair argument for keeping them consistent and adding the new models in. I guess what stuck in most people's, was a problem for most people was that you ended up with paying £35 or $8,000 if you're in Australia for a Skaven book, which is basically the same as the stuff you got for free online. And I think that's a really fair thing to complain about. Like, what extra stuff was I paying for? They added in things called Armies of Renown, which is a new thing that we started to see, where you could slightly build your armies different. This is kind of a mirroring of what you saw in the old world, where they have these Armies of Infamy. But they weren't quite as impactful as you have seen from the Armies of Infamy for the old world. They were pretty undercooked, I think is a fair thing to say. And while some of them got popular, most of them didn't and became a little bit like of a joke. So the copy paste issue, which is I've called this the copy paste drama. The copy paste drama, I think, created a huge amount of negative press for Age of Sigmar, the Age of Sigmar community, and the Age of Sigmar game, which I think is kind of fair, but also I don't really know the solution. A month after I've just got all my index and I just bought all the rules, I don't know what I want from a brand new book, but I know I want probably new Armies of Renown that are really cool and thematic, new Regiments of Renown, probably better battle formations, probably better artifacts and traits and a bunch of other stuff that's a little bit more in keeping with the theme, but they were a big miss. And also, this continued. Next, we got the Stormcast book. It was also copy-paste. We got a bunch of new models. Those new models also, they were very cool models, but also the power level of those models was really slim, really weak, really, really weak. So most people were also like, why would I even buy these? And that was disappointing, because for Stormcast players, they might have to wait 3 years for an update, which is not true, but at the time we didn't know it was true. So if we stuck to that kind of process, it'd be 3 years till something new happened. But actually, we get a big role reversal as we go on with this story. Then we got Slaves to Darkness. And I got to say, Slaves to Darkness was maybe one of the lowest points I've personally had live streaming and doing Battletome reviews in the way that I normally do it. The way I do Battletome reviews, like I'm doing with this video, is I live stream to an audience and we all talk about the rules and we pause the video and we have a chat about how we think things are going to work, and we have this kind of big debate, and they're all really passionate about it. I'm passionate about it. But the hatred, the upset, and because you're passionate, listen, if you spend £800 on something and you build it, paint it, you talk about it all week, you're in Discord servers and you go to events or whatever those things, and you tell me you're not passionate about it, I'll think you're a psycho. I don't know what else to tell you. Like, if you aren't getting emotional responses to the thing that you're passionate about, I don't know how you're living. Like, that's crazy. That's crazy. So, but the chat were mad, and I found doing that review really, really difficult, because people were turning up with legitimate criticisms. They were like, why is all of the Dark Oath stuff rubbish? Why is it just fight twice with these 3 units just the best thing ever? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know. Which didn't really help when we got around to the next book, which was the Grotmus book. Sorry, not the Grotmus book, the Uruks book. But we actually started to see Games Workshop take in, I think, a lot of what happened in that 6 month period. And we got the Grotmus RORs. Now, this is such a silly point, but at Christmas, they released a bunch of free rule sets for the Regiments of Renown. And now you could just say that this was a ploy or a marketing trick or whatever it might be, and I think it's all of those things. But this was such a breath of fresh air to the community, where there was a bunch of, if you don't know what a Regiment of Renown is, it's where you get a bunch of special units for a certain amount of points. You can take them in any army. You are now able to take Nurglings, a Nurgle unit, and you were able to put them inside an Ossiarch Bone Reaper army, which was nuts. And it made people really, really excited. which is what the game really needed and the community needed at this point. This is probably, I would say, between kind of December and February. This is probably the lowest I've seen the Age of Sigmar community yet. In the whole of all the editions and everything I've been through with the community, I think it's the lowest I've seen them, because people are like, is it just always going to be copy and paste stuff? Like, am I just got to pay loads of extra rules for not a lot? There's not a lot of flavor in these rules. When am I going to get that back? It was pretty downbeat. And I live stream about this all the time. So like, that's yeah, lowest so far. Yes, lowest so far. And I'm hoping that was a real lull in where we ended up with the game. But the Grotmas RORs were a highlight at that point, where they became this kind of like this island of like, oh, there's a nice fun thing that's happening here. Then we got the Uruk Warclans book, and again, very much like the Slaves to Darkness book, pretty rubbish, copy and paste. But also, and this is where we got the famous meme. It's not a famous meme. It's not all copy paste. It's actually a nerf, because people were coming in the chat and they were like, "Oh, is this thing the same?" I'm like, "Well, technically, it's kind of worse." And they were like, "Oh no." which is pretty disappointing. And we also got the Git Mob release. Now, the Git Mob release was fascinating. We got all of the Git Mob models. They weren't great. As models, they were amazing, but as rules, they were terrible. And then we got a bunch of buffs from Games Workshop after the release. The box clearly did not sell well. People clearly were like, wow, they are really terrible on the tabletop. Why would I take them? And then we saw a double buff. We saw like points reductions. We saw rules changes so quickly after that release, because it was quite clear that they'd massively made a mistake. Then we got the Soulblight Gravelords book, which with new faction terrain, a bunch of new models. And again, we saw some models go away, which we'll continue to see over the course of the edition. And I feel like we were on an upward trend, or I feel like we're on an upward trend at that point. I should also mention as well, obviously, that over all these books, Games Workshop, as well as making all the manifestations free, they've now made it so every army is going to have some terrain and also some manifestations, which are endless spells, for your army uniquely. So Soulblight got some terrain, they got some manifestations. Gitmob, they already had theirs. Uruks, they got theirs as well. So Uruk's got theirs. They got the new manifestations. They got their terrain piece in the Boss Rock Tower. So yeah, lots of stuff was also needed to buy into the game system as well. So people are like, okay, I need the manifestations, I need the terrain feature. Some people are really excited because they already had their Uruks. I guess a lot of this conversation sometimes is about new players, right? Like, how do a new player think about that the buy-in is much more? Whereas for the Uruks, for example, they're like, well, we've never had manifestations or terrain. Why is it that those silly Seraphon have always had it? Now we've got it as well. That's pretty good for them. So they're pretty happy about that. So I think people who own armies are happy that they've got additional stuff for their armies. I think people, and we saw the Stormcast Portaloo as well, but the people who like are getting into the game are like, wow, that's an even bigger buy-in. It's pretty interesting as a decision. Not necessarily sure I agree with it, but there it is. Okay, everyone got terrain. Then one thing we should also talk about over the past year that's happened. So those are the battle tomes. I think the battle tomes have generally been a low point for the community. That's based on my YouTube comments. That's based on live stream reactions. That's based on online discourse. They have not been very keen. They've not been very nice to the battle tomes. So that's kind of where it's been at. One of the things that has happened though over the course of the past year is Games Workshop have produced not only those monthly points updates, but a bunch of battle scroll updates, which is their balance patch updates. They did one every 3 months, and the one at Christmas I think was a particular highlight. We saw a change to the seasonal rules, which are called Honor Guard rules, adding a little bit of life into a bunch of different armies. We had Prize Beastmaster, which unfortunately made Gargants better, RIP. But we also had the Sergeant, which was able to make a bunch of infantry move a bit faster, which was good as well. They took some armies that weren't doing very well, like Seraphon, and they were like, what if we just give you Croak back? Which I think there's a lot of players out there who are mad about the fact that, that they brought Croak back, but they brought Croak back. And I think that stands out pretty well. They also changed a bunch of points around, and it was a really big kind of like change, and it really revitalized some armies as we like over those different points, which I think along with the aggressive management of the points in those monthly updates really kind of at least showed that while maybe the battle tomes were really samey, The game state could still change pretty drastically, which I think was really good. I think that was definitely a highlight, actually. And it really showcases that the rules should just be online, right? Which we'll get into in a moment. But the rules should be online because all of those rules updates and changes really brought the community to life, made them discuss a lot of stuff, made your WhatsApps and your Discords and, you know, your online conversation much more active, which you clearly want for the community. Then we got the new Garand stuff. So leading up to this very recently, and you've seen me do all the coverage in all the recent videos, we started to get a free bunch of rules for every single army over the course of about a month. And I got to say that this is a great change for the game. I think if they just have released the General's Handbook with the new seasonal rules, I think that would have already been pretty exciting. There's a bunch of extra rules in there. They changed battle tactics, which were generally not seen as very popular anyway, into a new format, which we'll have to see whether or not that works or doesn't work. But the new seasonal rules, I personally was a massive fan of. I made a video about this that got panned, absolutely slammed online, because I thought free additional rules was really good. A lot of people said it was blow and it was too much. But I mean, ultimately, it brought life to some units. You can't, on one hand, complain that the Stormcast book is boring and a copy and paste of the index, and then be mad when a free alternative version of how to play a certain unit pops up online. I think that's really positive for the game. And I talked about it, and I think maybe it's because I'd been through this like 9-10 month like process with the community, like talking about it, making videos online, that I was like, no, yeah, this is really good actually. Like we need this. Like we need more of this for the community. So free rules every day, community excited, everyone pumped. I think that was a really good change for the game and exactly what the game needed to kind of get everyone really hyped. And sure, it's all marketing. Sure. But if the marketing or the new stuff made you excited to play your minis, go out and play games with your friends, I don't care that it's marketing. It's fun. Like it makes you excited about what to play. And also, I think genuinely, and I said this in a video, maybe every day is a little bit much, but I wouldn't mind if for the rest of the edition, there was some alternative war scrolls or some additional little rules, additions that you could choose from, that you could choose to take in your games. Once a week, we've done like 3 alternative war scrolls for different random ones. There's 26, 25 armies. Even if they were to do like 4 a week, it would take a couple of months to do like a new war scroll for every single army. So it's really not that much. I think it was a real positive change, really good. And then we got the new GHB. And we got all the new missions. We got those kind of like the actual objectives being having colors and stuff. I'm not 100% certain about that. I think that's a weird flex. We got the change to battle tactics as well. We got the change to manifestations. They're still as confusing as they were, but they're not as impactful as they were because they were much more impactful. So, kind of in review, how has the past year gone? Is a great question. And I also am making this video because I want to find out how you all, what you all think about it. Now, this isn't just the end of the video. I've still got a bunch of stats to go through as well. But in conclusion, for me, I think it was an exciting start, seeing all the indexes, seeing everything that came out. Then there were definitely some low points where, and maybe that's just kind of what happens, right? Hype, and then you get like a downward slope as you kind of get into it. And you realize maybe it wasn't as big as the hype is, because that's also true for most things, right? Then you kind of like go through it and then you think, okay, there's some nice online changes. The rules changes are good online. The battle scrolls are good online. And I think we end up with a couple of points that seem really relevant. Print media is a terrible way to run a game, especially at this scale, especially at this magnitude, especially with this level of complexity. I think that's really fair. And I think doing stuff online is really positive and can have really good rewards. I don't think Games Workshop will ever move away from doing print media because it makes them so much money, but doing this stuff online was really, really positive, I think, and made some big impact. Everyone getting new models. We should also mention that as well. There was just a ton of new cool models, which I think is great. I think that's really, really good. List variety was not super strong at all. I still think there needs to be a lot to address that. That's the thing. But I think for me personally, I'm super hype about where we're going now. because we've got this new format, the new GHB, all the new missions, everything to play. But we've also got loads of new armies, like new books coming out, and we're going to be past that first year of pre-written battle tomes. So we might see a big drastic change in how they're written and what's going on. Now, I'm hopeful for that. I don't know that's going to happen. So I'm looking forward to that. But let's actually look at the data and let's have a look at what's happened to the game, especially in a competitive format, over the past year. First thing that we're going to look at is just how many people are playing. 12,000 players playing 29,000 games over 359 events worldwide from 36 different countries. That's cool to see. Now, these are only games or games tracked from 2-day events that happen that we track. So shout out to Warhammer Rob, who puts all this information together. So that's a ton of data. That's a ton of data to go through. And obviously we build this up over the year as we go through stuff on the Age of Sigmar Stats Center. But this is cool. We got like a special shout out to like Bolivia. I think we got our first ever 2-day events happening in Bolivia, which was fun as well. Like there's some really great communities. Obviously everyone in Australia, the US, everyone in Europe. There's so many like really big, healthy communities. And we saw loads of larger events start to happen as well, which was cool. Now, one of the things that I talked about earlier was that churn. Where players seem to, and definitely a lot of posts from different communities said there aren't as many people playing events. Now, this is kind of interesting because actually there are more people playing events, not necessarily many more people playing than the last GHB, the last edition, but more people. However, the format and the size of those events has changed pretty drastically. So taking a look at this graph, we can see that 50 plus person events is down 13% compared to the last GHB, which obviously happened under the last edition. So this year versus last year is what this is tracking, the red line being this year. But you can see that events that are 1 to 15 people, 16 to 23 people, and especially 24 to 49 people is up 16%. So those smaller events make a lot of sense to me. Now, I'm going to be super biased. I need to put my bias out there on the table before I talk about this so that you know that I have like an opinion that definitely can be construed as bias. I run events. I have an event in Nottingham, a venue in Nottingham. I run events and I run an Age of Sigmar event at least once a month, sometimes twice a month in the TSN arena. Please do come to my events. That would be super cool. But I think the format of a 24 person event is better. You know, you get more of like a personal touch. It's more comfortable. You're not like rammed into a meat market. But for me, as a tournament organizer, it's also much easier. The concept of running a 100-person event is overwhelming. I need 50 mats, which is crazy money. That's like, they're like £60. So 50 times £60 to get mats. Then I need terrain, or I need to borrow terrain. Just the logistics. Most of you watching this will have organized some sort of party in your life, and it sucks. You got to make sure everyone turns up. You got to make sure you got food. It's just crazy, the logistics of running a big event. And I'm not really sure, like, the juice is even worth the squeeze. Having a big event, I don't really know if it's, I guess you get a lot of people together. So there's marquee events that you see like CanCon, like Adepticon, like the Raccoon Rumble, like the large team events we see in Spain, large team events we see in Italy, the Nordic events, all the events run by, what are they called? Tactics, those guys, Threshold Tactics, all those events that run there around the kind of Amsterdam region. All of those are big marquee events that people can go to, which is really fun, but it takes a lot of effort. And if you are busy that weekend, which I think is one of the key concerns, if you're busy that weekend, then how can I just go to that? How can I go to that event? Whereas there's a local club and they're organizing an 18-person event and it's on the weekend that I'm free, that's much more easy to do. That's what I think. And I think the decentralization is really good because you're seeing more local clubs, smaller communities. And that's why we always try and cover them on the Age of Sigmar Stat Show, because I think it's as valid winning a 16-person event as it is winning a 100-person event. Some people won't agree with me, but I think it is. Those 16 people could just be the best 16 players in your country. So it's pretty solid. So yeah, this is a very interesting graph. And I think this will actually continue to trend this way, where we'll see more people or less people playing in large 50-person events. One of the really interesting things, it's been brought up by a chatter in my chat called Big Sexy 617. Shout out to Big Sexy. Is why don't we include 1 day data in 1 day events in our data set? So we only include 2 day events because for me, as like a TO, a player, and someone who's been involved in kind of the meta-analysis of Age of Sigmar for a long time, the games that are really relevant for me are kind of games 3, 4, and 5. The first couple of games that you get in a GT are random, right? Really, whoever plays who, and therefore you can't really start to pass out the army strength versus player skill and a bunch of other stuff as well. We do break this down in some of our data information when we do. If you go back and watch any of our data videos, there's something that we use called TWIP, which is a really good way of like accessing that information. Also, the positive win rate potential for armies. Both of those start to try and understand like the player skill and the army skill, the army power can be different to each other. But for a 1 day event, in my opinion, while there can be some that are super popular, which when we talk about this in a moment, does mean that there's even more people playing Age of Sigmar than that 12,000 people number. For me, the games that really start to help us understand which armies are too strong or too weak happens in game 3, 4, and 5. And so you need 2 day data to be able to make that happen. Now, I could be wrong. That's that simple. I could just be wrong. But that's the way I like to look at the information to help me understand it. And so that's why we don't include 1 day data. But playing a 1 day event is just as valid as playing a 2 day event. That's super worth saying. Which does bring me back to this 12,000 players number around the world. 12,000 players playing is cool, but if we take in 1 day events and people who don't even attend events, I think we've probably got an active player base of something like, I don't know, 25 to 40,000 people over just this last year who were into Age of Sigmar. I think that's a great number of people to be involved. That's a pretty active player base, and that doesn't include everyone else on the periphery, the people who just paint, the people who are just interested in the lore, the people who would like to play but haven't as of played yet. And I guess if I have to, I'll throw in the people who also play Spearhead. So that number is probably even bigger as a community size, which is pretty cool. Talking about events, though, one of the really cool stats that we have is the event attendance per million population for this GHB. So this is a really silly stat, but this is how many people play events based on how many people live in the country. And Norway is kicking everyone's ass. 54 people per million are playing over in Norway. Sweden in second place, 39 people out of every million. Then United Kingdom, Australia, and New Zealand. Then you got Denmark, Canada, Finland, Austria, and Slovenia. And the Slovenia and the USA, interestingly, have about the same number of people who play per million, based on the relative size of the countries, which is pretty interesting. Obviously, USA is huge, but does that mean that the USA has got like Games Workshop and also Age of Sigmar has got the opportunity for more permutation or like more people to play inside of it? That'd be interesting to check. And then we've got Czechia, Germany is quite low, Belgium, Spain, Poland, France, Ireland, Italy, Bolivia. Now, one of the major issues, obviously, is English being the primary language in which this is produced, and lots of the media does cover, is like, and some of these books are not translated into English as well. I should point that out. So English being like the main like kind of like language that this game is discussed in, probably has a massive impact on like the sorts of countries that play it. But also, it's unsurprising to see the very well-educated, high social program countries be able to play more of a game than some of the others. So there we go. So we were talking about that churn again in player population, how many people are playing. Another great graph from Rob here. This is a graph that shows you how many additional events or how many less events there were compared to the year before. So over the past year, in July, launching the new edition, no one knows what's going on, no one knows what their rules are, there were 5 less events. But immediately coming into August, we had 15 more events than last year. Then it was September was the same. Then October, we had 6 more events than last year. November, we had 3 more. December, we had 12 more. Then leading into this year, January, February, March especially was up. April was down for some reason, down 6. But then we massively came back in May, where we had 18 more. This means that over the course of this year, compared to last year, we had 61 more events. And if we turn that into people, we have 842 more people playing. And again, this big 508 down number that we see in May, obviously related to how many events there are. And it is an interesting question. Is there more people if there are more people organizing events? Like with April, there were less events on there, so less people played. That's a great question as well. Like, do there need to be more TOs? Do TOs need to be paid better? Should Games Workshop, instead of just giving golden tickets out and costing tournament organizers money, should they instead be like, hey, you're running an event, here's a couple of £100 or something, thanks very much for running an event. Makes a lot of sense. They sell a lot of miniatures for it. Obviously, that's never going to happen, but there we go. This is a good thing. So there are more people playing Age of Sigmar, and there are more events than they were in Age of Sigmar 3rd edition or last year of it. Next up, we're going to just look at some just raw, fun army data for the different armies. So over the past year, we can see the most popular army that's been played across the past year has been Slaves to Darkness, followed by Nighthaunt, because they were just so strong at the beginning of the edition. Slaves to Darkness started strong. They got a book. They continued to be strong. And they've only actually really started to drop off over the past few months. And they are on the downward slide. Okay, Lumineth Realm Lords, Stormcast Eternals also popular. And that's interesting that if you take Stormcast Eternals over the course of the entire year, not as popular as some of those other armies, which is a surprise. OCR Bone Reapers and Soulblight Gravelords. At the bottom, obviously our poor Beast of Chaos and Bone Splitters that have been kicked out of the game. And KO have been the least popular in the past year. Daughters of Cain, Cities of Sigmar is not because of the miniatures, just because the army rules are just not fun. Also, the hobby time to do that is also really, really high. Deepkin, Sinesh, Fire Slayers, Cruel Boys, Iron Jaws. Crazy to see Iron Jaws at the bottom. But this is event data. This isn't the popularity of your faction. This is the popularity of a faction chosen to play an event to probably try to win games. And shout out to all of 33 of the worldwide Bone Splitters players, all 33. Okay. And so people have mostly thought that taking Slaves to Darkness to an event will help them win games. We go look at the raw data though. Ideth Deepkin players gambled big. Over the course of the past year, the most successful army have been Ideth Deepkin. So this is dodging nerfs, kind of floating just at the top of that surface, bubbling at the top. They've been consistently good. If you've been watching me talk about them on the Age of Sigmar Stat Center, they've been really solid. They're about to get a new book as well, so that'll be really interesting. Sadly for me and all other thinking fans, the Sons of Behemoth are also up there as well. Now, considering how strong they were at the start of the edition, to see that Gloomspite Gits are at the bottom over the course of the whole GHB, this does not represent where they currently are in the game. This does not say that right now they're rubbish. They're just over the course of the GHB, they have underperformed along with Fire Slayers, who took loads of heavy nerfs. And then we've got Seraphon, Lumineth Realm Lords, Flesh Eater Court, Soulblight Gravelords, all kind of floating around that top area. And then we've got a nice, healthy, fat middle with Cities of Sigmar, Bone Reapers, and Kharadron Overlords, all currently very, very intimidated. But we've got a new GHB now. It's a new edition. This is why we do not ever track data over the course of the year, because it really changes how we look at this information. Because we'd be like saying, Sons of Behemoth are currently very good, FYI. But they're much better than that graph currently shows. And some of these armies that are in the lower section are actually doing better, and some are doing worse. So we never look at this data like this. But over the last year, I will crown Ideth Deepkin the champions of the Skaven Tide release. So congratulations. Who would have thought it? Now, where it gets really interesting is if we start to break this down based on region. So over the past year, we can see that the people from the UK and Ireland love their Sons of Behemoth. Over the past year, Sons of Behemoth for UK and Ireland, much bigger. Lumineth Realm Lords as well, Flesh Eater Courts, Maggotkin, Daughters of Cain, all at the top. Smooth Brain UK, that's what I'm going to call us. And that is embarrassing to be here, from here, and all of us players doing that. If we go look at North America, they're very different. They're much more chaos focused. Hedonites of Sinesh, and Disciples of Zinch are up there for them. Very interesting. With Seraphon, Idnet Deepkin, and still Sons of Behemoth in there as well. Sinesh being at the top from America is very funny. XS in all forms. Listen, they play a lot of Warhammer in Texas, and they like everything bigger. I don't know what else to say. So congratulations to them. Then if we go look at Europe, we can see that Deepkin, LRL, and Ogre Moor tribes at the top of their pile. That's fascinating to see. Deepkin, very good. Definitely a smart pick, as we've seen. Low pick rate, really low meta representation, but high win rate. Deepkin at the top. LRL as well. Makes sense. I'm pretty certain elves are based off the Scandies, so makes a lot of sense there. Then if we're looking at the rest of the world, which is going to include Australia, Oceania, the Global South, a bunch of different countries, there's some real small locations, we can see that the Nighthaunt dominated this group here. Fleshy Court, Soulblight Gravelords, Daughters of Cain, none of the, I don't know where Sons of Behemoth even are on this little track, but they are not there, proving that maybe this is the smartest part of the world. We'll have to see, but they are very good. Nighthaunt up there though, crazy good. And also some of these other countries, especially where either the cost is too high, Australia, or maybe where the average income for a population isn't as high as other places. Therefore, just buying a new army or buying lots of new models isn't really an option, and sticking with a single army is something that you choose from. Nighthaunt being something you got into early in the edition and continue to use, it makes a lot of sense as well. So what's the TLDR for the past year? That's a great question. It's a great question. I think listening to me recording the video, listening to myself back, I felt like a lot of it was negative, right? Like I felt like some elements, like the copy-paste battle tomes, the confusion around manifestations, some of those elements really felt like an undercooked game. It did. However, like I've had a great time over the past year. I've run a lot of events. I've played in a lot of events as well. Become addicted to running Neve Black Talon. Just obsessed. I just love it. I'm addicted to running Bloodthirsters as well. That's also really, really fun. But there's been some bad stuff, but I think there's also been some really, really good stuff. And also seeing the Age of Sigmar community, which ultimately is a community, even if you joined not at the start during Age of Sigmar 0, when they blew up the old world and you had a bunch of models on squares, you had to rebase about 12,000 models. Like even seeing that community, Age of Sigmar has always been a community game. Like the lore is good, like, and we could talk about the lore more, but ultimately, like you're not getting 4 million YouTube views talking about the Age of Sigmar lore. Like it's not that big a deal compared to like things like 40k is what I'm trying to say. Like it's not the main reason people are in it. I think the main reason people are in it is because the models are cool. The universe is cool. I think so. But I think primarily the models are cool. Playing the game is fun, and playing events with people is really fun as well. And I think that that's maybe got better. It's got simpler and it's got better. List writing isn't as strong as it once was, but I feel like with some of the new changes, the new GHB, new rules, new potential for Games Workshop to just once a month drop some random new War Scrolls, which is a new world we're living in, which is really great, and a bunch of new battle tomes, as well as Chaos Dwarfs coming up. I think the game is going to get better and better, which I think is really good and healthy for us as a community. So community is bigger, community is really healthy, and the community is also really different as well. Like those win rates right at the end, it really showcases that the conversations different communities have are so different. Everyone in the UK, where I'm based, has having different conversations to Europe, to Australia, to America, and that's really good because it means that you get this like collaboration that you see culminate in things like the Age of Sigmar World Team Championships, or when different people just travel between those different communities and play, which I think is good as well. So I think overall, Age of Sigmar, especially with the new GHB and especially with all the new rules, is in a really great place. But I think we've had a tough year. I think that's the conclusion. I think we've had a tough year. The free online rules stuff has really carried us through the year, and now we've got a good year ahead of us. I think it's a good place to be. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. Thank you to the Twitch chat who've been hanging out with me while I record it. I live stream Monday through to Friday if you want to come and hang out with me while I do. Thank you to everyone on my Patreon for supporting me, and I hope you've enjoyed this video. I'll see you soon, and let me know what you think down below.